Strap into your seats and get ready. It's time for the Mortarpod.
Hey everybody, Alex Stephenson and Jake Faas here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Mortarpod. The Mortarpod is brought to you by SeemsGoodMagic.com. If you have not been to SeemsGoodMagic.com, I recommend checking it out. It's where I'm posting cube videos, and we've got standard, modern, legacy, all sorts of different content. Definitely going to dive right into Journey into Nyx when that comes online, which is going to be 1 week from now. I don't know if everybody else has tried Journey into Nyx so far, but it's been a lot of fun. Like Constellation, I felt like played very well. Strive, I don't know, how did Strive play for you?
It's cool. Even striving once is fine, usually. It's just like Kicker.
Yeah, are we going to see any constructed out of either of those? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Because Strive is so dependent on creatures. Unless a heroic deck post-rotation becomes an aggro deck, then maybe.
It could be. But if you don't know the new format for the show, we've got 2 segments that we're going to run through. We've got this brand new one called Cyclical Evolution, where we talk about all of the old cycles, and we're systematically going through, earliest core sets, all the expansions, everything. So we're going to cover all of the cycles of Magic cards, which is going to be really interesting. We've already found some really interesting ones. And then Weird Harvest. So if you want to get a hold of me, mortarpod at SeemsGoodMagic.com is my email address. And yeah, just email me or go to SeemsGoodMagic.com and click on Contact, and you can get a hold of me through that. All right, without further ado, let's start the show. Cyclical Evolution. All right, Cyclical Evolution. So we're going to talk about some old cycles. Last week we did Alpha, so we were going to do Arabian Nights, but we looked through it and there weren't any cycles that we could see.
No, I don't think so.
So if anybody does have cycles within Arabian Nights or that they think is cycles that we didn't cover, go ahead and email us. But we looked through the whole thing, and it's a small set too, so
yeah,
it just really wasn't that much. Antiquities, though, had some, just not a lot, so we combined it with Legends, and we're going to cover both. And we're just going to grind through this. It's going to be awesome, though. We've got some really cool ones. Definitely some weird cycles I think people didn't really realize, but let's start it off. All right. So first we've got Artifact Ward, which is an addition to what was in Alpha. And the ward spells each grant protection from a color. Artifact Ward from Antiquities, adding on to that. But you should mention kind of the odd part about Artifact Ward. Sets it apart.
They didn't give it protection from artifacts, which is really funny because giving it protection from artifacts would have worked exactly the way that this works, but just with the added effect that it couldn't be the target of artifact spells, which wouldn't matter. So instead they went through naming each part of protection that would be relevant for artifacts and just saying each of those abilities on the card against the artifact. But it works exactly how protection from artifacts would have worked, except that I guess if you were to change Artifact Ward to an artifact, it wouldn't make Artifact Ward fall off.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So, yeah, how does that work with the auras? Because they do say target creature gains protection from white.
Well, those were all errata to say that the protection granted by it didn't remove itself. So they were all fine, even if you were to... So the way that you would get all 5 of them on one creature would be to cast all of the laces on each one that wasn't the white one. And then play the white one last.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's really strange. Otherwise you couldn't do it? Very weird. But alright, so not much too much else to say about that, except that they were like afraid to give protection from artifact, which is just really strange.
Yeah, they just didn't want to confuse people, I guess, and so they went with the more confusing way of listing it all out on the card.
Alright, next we've got Black Vice, which we didn't talk about during Alpha, but in Antiquities we've got some additions to this cycle, and one kind of interesting one. But we've got Black Vice, Cursed Rack, and the Rack, and maybe you should talk about how these cards are related to each other, and then we can talk about Ivory Tower, which is the last one.
Well, Black Vice, Cursed Rack, and the Rack are all kind of the screw over your opponent in some way. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. You know, if you get the Black Vice and the Rack out, they have to have 3 or 4 cards in their hand or take damage during their upkeep. If you get the Cursed Rack out, they have a max hand size of 4. And they're all kind of cool effects. Really, the cycle part of it is that they're all torture devices that are affecting or somehow related to your opponent's hand, and they all affect your opponent. And then they all are drawn by Richard Thomas, or the art is done by Richard Thomas. So they all include this tortured man, basically, tortured voodoo doll looking man. And then I guess with Ivory Tower, that is kind of the antithesis of the Black Vice. And I think they realized that Black Vice was too good, so they printed Ivory Tower as a way to actually balance it out. Yeah.
What's interesting is, yeah, Ivory Tower is additionally the multiple of they're using the 4 as the count. So all of them are kind of related, except I guess the Rack is fewer than 3.
Well, the Rack and Black Vice kind of set up a little bit of a here's your safe ground, and Cursed Rack is something you can use against Ivory Tower. So they all kind of, it's a weird sort of thing. I feel like there is something there that draws them all together and makes it feel like a cycle, but it might not have necessarily been a really clean one.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, next we have from both from Antiquities, Urza's Chalice and Tablet of Epicure. And these are an expansion on what we presented in Alpha: Crystal Rod, Iron Star, Ivory Cup, Throne of Bone, and Wooden Sphere, and Soulnet. Now, the 5 I first mentioned are the associated with each color. Whenever you play a spell of that color, you can pay 1 and you gain 1 life. These have been expanded in the future that we're eventually going to talk about. But Soulnet was still related to this because it was the 1 mana artifact that also, if you paid 1 when a creature died, you gain a life. Now, Urza's Chalice is like the Crystal Rods and Iron Stars in that whenever you cast an artifact, you gain 1 life, and Tablet of Epicure is like Soulnet. Whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard, you gain 1 life. There's some overlap between Soulnet and Tablet of Epicure if it were, say,
an artifact creature. Yeah.
Which is interesting, too. But once again, just adding on to the cycle, it's like they really wanted this whole sort of life gain aspect of the game to be relevant. They always have, you know, and it's tough. Lifelink's not always as relevant as you want it to
Yeah,
be.
that's
It's
the truth.
very match dependent where gaining life is important. Okay, next we have Mightstone and Weakstone. So these are both from Antiquities as well. 4 mana Mightstone. All attacking creatures get +1/+0, and bear in mind that's also your opponent's creatures. And then Weakstone is 4 mana. All attacking creatures lose -1/-0, which would be all attacking creatures get -1/-0. Creatures with power less than 1 deal no damage was the original text they had on it too.
In case you were wondering.
You can see how it's antiquated.
I guess your opponent might think that you gain that life if they attack with a negative power creature.
Oh, I see. Yeah, negative power was probably confusing early on. Okay, well...
not much more to say about this one. They're just... They're
cool.
the antithesis of each other.
They're definitely an interesting cycle. Clearly, you know, 4 mana artifacts that +1/-1. They seem
funny
like...
that Orcish Oriflame is exactly Mightstone, but only for you, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, Mightstone feels like it's playable. It would have been playable early on.
They could make that as uncommon now.
I wonder if Control decks could have run Weakstone out of sideboard early on, something like that, maybe. I'm not
Possible.
Sure. Next we've got the Urza's Cycle of Lands. These are definitely well known and famous. Urza's Tower, Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Mine. And Jake mentioned to me early on, we didn't know if we wanted to include all the art because there's a bunch of different art for
each one of these.
Yeah.
But then also for Strip Mine and Mishra's Factory.
Yeah, just a lot of stuff in general. So we're not going to put all of the alternate art up.
And multiple art for the same card isn't a cycle. It's just different art. So.
And if you don't know what the Urza's lands do, it's if you have all three out, the Urza's Mine and the Urza's Power Plant generate 2 colorless instead of 1, and the Urza's Tower generates 3. So these are played in a modern deck, popular enough for that. And it's cool that the tower. It's cool that the tower generates 3. And the it's like sets it apart from the power plant in the Urza's Mine.
It definitely always felt like the strongest one of them all.
I think so too. All right.
Whoa.
Nice.
There, that's the problem. Okay.
So, yeah, these are played in Modern. I think they're really good. Definitely popular enough to be helping to cast Emrakul in Modern, so popular card. And I'm sure they were very popular when they first came out. But a cool cycle, and a very early one that was unique.
Yeah.
Next we've got Circle of Protection Artifacts, which was in Antiquities, and now we're crossing over into Legends territory. So we've got Greater Realm of Preservation. So these are both, in our opinion, continuations of the Circle of Protection cycle. Circle of Protection Artifacts, pretty clear. Something unique about it, you have to pay 2 to prevent the damage from the artifact source. And our reasoning behind that probably was because, Antiquities was just full of artifacts.
Yeah.
So white being able to protect itself from so many different creatures and artifacts that dealt damage just seemed powerful enough to warrant to have to pay 2 per source.
And maybe it's also like every color gets access to artifacts, so to be able to prevent against every deck, you really should have to pay a little more.
Yeah, no, I agree. That makes sense. And then we've got Greater Realm of Preservation in white, which just seemed like a foolish card to print, but it prevents from both. It's a Circle of Protection that costs 2, 1 and a white, and it prevents all damage against a red or a black source. So it's like 2 Circle of Protections wrapped up in 1 card. I think it's very strong.
Yeah, I do too.
And it seems wholly unnecessary to have printed that when you already had Circle of Protections.
Yep.
They really botched it in general because, remember, they didn't print Circle of Protection Black until beta. They had actually forgotten, as mentioned on last week's episode. But, yeah, so, I mean, Circle of Protections haven't even stuck around.
Yeah, they're just too powerful. That effect should always cost at least white mana,
Alright, next we've got Active Volcano and Flash Flood in Legends. So Active Volcano is 1 red instant. Destroy target blue permanent or return a blue island to its owner's hand. Enchantments on target land are destroyed. Funny that they mentioned that.
I know. Don't forget.
And then we've got Flash Flood in blue. Destroy a red permanent or return a mountain. So very interesting. Makes much more sense for, well, I guess it makes more sense for blue because they had bounce. That red typically wouldn't bounce, so returning an island is kind of weird, but they are land disruption at the same time, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But clearly a cycle, opposites of each other.
They're both so good, too.
Are they played in Legacy at all?
I don't think they are, but I feel like
they could, maybe.
I feel really like returning an island could be kind of effective.
For 1 red.
If
or
you're
destroying a blue permanent.
Yeah.
Taking out a Delver for 1. There's probably just something better, because they do the Pyroblast, right?
But that can't take out their land drop from the previous turn, which would be really sweet.
I presume they play tested both, and they've found the Pyroblast to be better. But still,
because it can counter Force of Will and stuff.
You're not going to see color hate like this, I wouldn't think, very often.
No.
This is old school, real color and land hate. Next is a really funny cycle from Legends. Adventurers Guildhouse, Cathedral of Sarah, Mountain Stronghold, Seafarers Quay, and Unholy Citadel. So they all essentially do the same thing. All of your, whatever color they are, legends gain bands with other legends. So, green, white, red, blue, and black. All of them are represented. And the lands, should be noted, do not tap for colorless mana, which is also a thing that they kind of don't do. In fact, you said they won't do it anymore,
Yeah,
right?
they don't like to do that. I think Ayavugan is the last land that didn't have a mana ability on it. And it still reduced the cost of spells, you know.
I see. But, yeah, so it's old school. These are so narrow, which makes it really funny. It would have been cool if it was all your Legends game bans with Legends.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a cool one-of land, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But the fact that they separated out is just really funny.
Yeah, and they didn't really need to do it at all because of gold Legends, you know. All of the Legends in the set are gold, so really.
But just, I really like the art on these, so I urge you to check them out. Very cool. Next is another very famous, classic, nostalgic Magic cycle, the Elder Dragon Legends. We have Arcades Sabbath, Chromium, Nicol Bolas, Vivictus Asmati, and Palladium Moors. These just bring me back to my childhood, but they all have similar mana costs. They represent actually all of the shards.
Yeah, our band shards. Shards of Alara.
Yeah, all of the Shards of Alara shards. So they each have 2 of each mana, colored mana cost from the shards in their mana cost, and then 2 colorless. They all cost that amount. They all have flying, and then they have some diverse abilities. But you do have to pay 1 of each color that's in their mana cost during your upkeep, or they're buried or destroyed.
Sacrifice.
Now it would be sacrificed. You're right. But they were all cool. Nicol Bolas kind of stood out as kind of the most amazing one. But, you know, Palladium Moors, Flying Trample, that's nothing to scoff at. That's huge.
Yeah, and Arcades Sabbath was really good too.
So they were all really cool. And Chromium, I guess, fell a little bit short.
Yeah.
It only had Rampage too. And Flying, so it just wasn't.
It didn't Rampage. Do shit.
Rampage just missed the mark.
Becoming a 9/9, not even that impressive. With 2 blockers.
Rampage, unfortunately, needed Trample to be relevant, or else it was kind of useless. But yeah, this is a classic cycle. Not much to say. I'm sure they were played when they could be, but they were hard to cast.
Yeah, and they sure were, and keep around.
Cool cards, very cool. The coolest cards to come out of Legends, probably.
Yeah, definitely the most impactful.
Now we've got Beasts of Bogarden and Ivory Guardians, and Jake, you were the one that pointed this one out, so you were almost unsure it was an actual cycle, but they have different mana costs. The Beasts of Bogarden costs 5, and the Ivory Guardians cost 6. They're in red and white. They both have protection from red. They both get +1/+1 if they control the opposite color. So in Ivory Guardian's case, if your opponent controls a red permanent, they get +1/+1, and Beast gets +1/+1 if your opponent controls any white permanents. And they're both 3/3s, so I definitely thought they were similar enough.
Yeah, they're very close. They're just so close without being the same that it's weird, you know?
Yeah, it's weird that they obviously were keeping the other one in mind when they made it. It is odd that they made the Ivory Guardians more expensive. I'm not exactly sure why.
It gives the bonus to other Ivory Guardians too. That's why.
I see. Okay.
So 2 Ivory Guardians out would make 2 5/5s with Pro Red.
Okay.
If
no,
they
that
had
makes
a red
sense.
permanent.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool then that it costs the extra. It is very pricey. But, you know, very cool cards in general. Beast of Bogarden, I'm sure, was very, very powerful when it was playing against any sort of red or white deck. Both are very useful. It's cool that it's a card
versatile in that way.
Yeah. In limited, definitely. I wonder if it was constructed played. I'm not even sure.
Yeah,
but
sure
I think this is close enough where we can consider it a cycle. Next, we have the battery cards. These are kind of humorous because they're notoriously slow. And
yeah, they are. They're fun in their own way, but they are slow.
They all cost 4 mana. And there's 1 for each color. And then you pay 2 and tap it, and you can put a counter on it. What is the type of counter now?
They're charge, I think.
Charge counters, okay. And then you can tap and add blue to your mana pool for each counter that you remove from it. So they're very slow going. Do you even play on the commander? They're probably too slow for that.
If you're monocolored, you can, you know, but They do always tap for their respective color, and you can charge them up more. So, you know, you don't always have to remove counters to get mana from
Okay,
them.
that's cool. All right, well in that case, I guess they're at least playable. I think the ones I'm thinking of that are worthless are a cycle we're gonna have to get to later.
Yeah.
A land cycle.
Yeah. Oh, that
specifically.
one for
Yeah.
sure.
But these are fine then, I guess. If you can always tap for a mana, then these are probably useful enough. So you can play them Commander then, I guess.
I've played them, and I've been okay with them.
All right. Next we have Crevice, Deadfall, Great Wall, Quagmire, and Undertow. This is definitely a cycle. They all have to do with their own color. Gaining creatures with Mountain Walk may be blocked as if they did not have this ability as Crevice. Creatures with Forest Walk may be blocked as if they did not have this ability with Deadfall. Great Wall is for white or Planeswalk creatures, and Quagmire is for Swamp Walk, and Undertow is for Island Walk. And they all cost 3 mana, so pretty clear cycle. All very pretty much useless cards. Great Wall in particular, we've had that on Weird Harvest.
They printed a card just so that it was useful.
We had it as Weird Harvest because it was called Great Wall and it's an enchantment. There's just a lot of
misnomers about it.
Old aspects of it. But it's funny, which one would actually be the most useful now?
Probably Quagmire and Undertow. Quagmire may be the most. I feel like Swamp Walk is the most heavily represented land walk.
Yep. I think I probably agree with that, but these are just so narrow that they're not playable.
Yeah, it really should be a shuts down all land walk card, which came out in Ice Age eventually, but that's how it should be.
I think they were just making too many weak cards.
They were just making cards, and to screw over your own color is just shitty, you know?
Yeah.
They should have really been like, well, and if you're screwing over opposite colors, it's not good either, you know, because you're not playing against your enemies or with your enemies' colors.
This is definitely just too narrow and not a good enough ability for cost to be good. Next we've got Darkness and Holy Day, and this is the sort of black and white being represented as still like the powerhouse colors. We've got Darkness for 1 black instant, and it's a fog essentially, and then we have Holy Day for 1 white, and it's a fog. So definitely a cycle. We were gonna put fog on here, we didn't, but that's from. I think
that's from Alpha, but still, it doesn't really matter. Holy Day and Darkness kind of, they're showing the two sides of the coin for each one, you know, and I like that aspect of it.
Me too.
Fog is more like a natural occurrence, and so it's not really part of this cycle. Like
green is all over fog effects.
Yeah.
And typically, I mean, I guess white gets it too. It's very unusual in black.
Yeah, when you think of darkness, though, you're thinking of like the kind of darkness that you don't get to see at like your hand in front of your face. Like that's what they're doing. They're blinding you, really. You know, it should have been mass blindness or something cool like that.
I could agree with that.
Hysterical blindness.
Cool cycle. Both these cards very playable, and I think one was time shifted and one was brought back later, at least. So Darkness was time shifted, and Holy Day
has been reprinted actually. So
10th edition or something. Very cool. Next we have Dwarven Song, Heaven's Gate, Sea King's Blessing, Sylvan Paradise, and Touch of Darkness. These are all 1 mana each from their own color, and they change the color of 1 or more target creatures to red until end of turn. So it is kind of cool that it's a 1 mana spell that can target all of creatures in play. But is this actually
great heroic triggers?
Is this actually useful beyond that?
Touch of Darkness is at least a counter to back in that day, like the non-black clause on a lot of removal spells from black. Yeah. Which one's your favorite art?
I don't know. I kind of like the Sea King's Blessing. That one gives me morale. I like it's like an old man looking onto a ship. Heaven's Gate's kind of cool. It's an overhead, huge perspective. You see how big the doors are. Dwarven Song's kind of goofy. The dwarf faces are funny. Sylvan Paradise has a nude woman.
Boobs.
Laying next to some, like a creek bed. And then Touch of Darkness is a man looking at his arm, mutating into some sort of demonic dark presence, one could say.
Yeah.
I don't know. Which one's your favorite?
I love Touch of Darkness, actually.
It's very cool.
And it's almost like the whole world is changing. Like you can see the sky behind him too.
No, I like that. So it's like his whole. That's cool that you point that out. Pete Venters.
Yeah, he did a really good job with that one. Sylvan Paradise is cool. It just doesn't look like what the card is supposed to do. Sea King's Blessing at least looks like what it's supposed to do. Heaven's Gate, I'm not so sure about, and Dwarven Song, no.
These are pretty narrow cards. They're kind of funny, but like you said, it's funny that it's actually good for triggering heroic. For 1 mana, you can target all your heroic guys. But very narrow ability. Next we have the glyphs. Speaking of narrow, Glyph of Delusion, Glyph of Destruction, Glyph of Doom, Glyph of Life, and Glyph of Reincarnation. And these all do different stuff, but they're definitely a cycle because they're all 1 mana instants from each color. So we have the Glyph of Delusion, which put X counters on a creature that target wall blocked this turn, and X is the power of the blocked creature. And creature does not untap as normal while it has 1 or more of these counters on it, and then you remove a counter during the creature's upkeep, creature controller's upkeep. So you're putting X counters where X is the power of the blocked creature. It's an interesting card, so it keeps it locked down for whatever its power is. Pretty good for 1 mana instant, but it's funny that you have to have a wall, which is another relationship that all of these glyphs have. Glyph of Destruction for red, target wall gains +10/+0 when blocking, and any damage dealt to it is reduced to 0. Very cool as well. I like that. 10 power on a wall. I'm sure that was very huge back in the day with like animate wall. You could do some cool stuff, but it was
when
for blocking
only.
Yeah. Glyph of Doom, 1 black. All creatures blocked by target wall are destroyed at the end of combat. Still very cool. It's like Death Touch, but you don't have to deal damage. So more like basilisks, I guess.
Yeah, and you keep your wall on that one. Glyph of Destruction seems like a little too upsetting, you know, that your wall dies too.
Oh, I'd forgotten that clause. Yeah, it dies at end. Why is it relevant that the damage is reduced to 0?
Then, right?
Yeah, it's very strange actually. Now that you mention it. It's very weird. Glyph of Life, 1 white, and damage done to target wall by attacking creatures is added to your life point total. That's kind of interesting. Now it's just life total. They've stopped using life point total. But very interesting. Still life gain, not that impressive. And then we've got Glyph of Reincarnation, and this is after at the end of combat, all creatures blocked by target wall this turn are destroyed. For each creature destroyed this way, choose a creature in the attacker's graveyard and return to play under attacker's control, and treat these creatures so they were just summoned. I see. So it's like bringing creatures back?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
It's almost like polymorphing them from creatures in the graveyard. So that was Green's like way to interact with the graveyard.
Very strange.
Reincarnate things.
So that's what it was doing to them? It's like changing their creatures into their other ones? Very weird. It seems so narrow that it's almost outrageous. It involves you having a wall. It involves...
You could do it to your opponent's wall. It could be an anti-wall card.
To change your guys.
To change your weak guy into a big, strong guy.
Very strange card. One of the most narrow cards I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, this one's really hard to
even
see
decipher.
Using.
And I'm reading the old... I was reading, trying to Oracle text it as I went, because it's got some crazy old text on it. But they're cool. They have little figures on them, little symbols.
Glyphs, one might say.
But they're cool looking. I would recommend checking them out. They're hard to describe. Next we have Gosta Dirk, Lord Magnus, and Urdrago. So this is a weird cycle of legends. They all have first strike, and they all, like those in 3-mana enchantments cycle we went over, they all
stop some land walk ability.
They all stop a land walk. Island walk, plains walk, and swamp walk.
And forest walk.
Lord Magnus is different than the other two in that he costs 1 less colored mana, he has 1 less toughness, and he stops 2 land walks, plains walk and forest walk. So kind of an interesting cycle. And
they all have first strike, so that presumably they're better blockers against the new things they can
But they're
block.
still fantastic attackers.
Yeah.
These were actually probably some of the better creatures to come out of Legends, since they actually had a relevant ability that's still stayed relevant today.
Yeah. I don't think that they printed enough Landwalk to justify the amount of Landwalk hate
that they
deck.
had. You're absolutely right. I think they really thought that Landwalk was going to be more integral to the game than it eventually became. It seems like they really thought that was a ability that was going to retain, the test of time. But I mean, it has in a certain way, but just in a much more limited aspect.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of constructed Landwalk going on. It happens. It does happen, but just not much. Next we have Hammerheim, Urborg, Talaria, Pendelhaven, and Caracas. This is a cool cycle. This is lands, legendary lands that enter and tap for a colored mana, no disadvantage, and they have an extra ability on them. So Hammerheim is for red, and it removes Landwalk abilities from a creature until end of turn. More Landwalk hate, just like you said. Urborg, which taps for black, and you can take First Strike away or Swamp Walk away from a guy. More land hate. Talaria, add a blue, and you can remove banding.
This one's so terrible.
From another creature. Very narrow.
And only during upkeep.
Wow. Interesting that they would make it that narrow. They really thought taking banding away was a big deal.
I think it was the combat, like you have one blocker with banding, I'll remove its banding ability while you block.
Jeez. Next is Pendelhaven. They were just worried about that scenario. Pendelhaven actually did survive the test of time, and this was played in some tournaments and stuff, and still a relevant card today. But it's green, and it taps to give a 1/1 creature +1/+0, or +1/+2 until end of turn. So very relevant card, very cool. I like it a lot. Turning 1/1s into 2/3s. I like it. So this is the not the best of the cycle. Actually, second to the next one, Caracas, which is the white one that you can tap to return a legend to its owner's hand. So clear why this card is so good.
Yeah.
Turning Emrakul can be very important.
Yeah.
Especially when he's been cheated out by Sneak and Show or something like that.
Yeah.
By what's it? Not Sneak and Show.
It is Sneak and Show.
What's the name of the actual card though?
Show and Tell.
Show and
or
Tell.
Sneak Attack.
Yeah.
Hammerheim, Urborg, and Talaria. It's funny that removing, like stopping your opponent from having abilities was what they were trying to do, when it really should have been giving you abilities somehow.
Yeah, Pendelhaven had it right.
Yeah, and so did Caracas. That was the right way to do that too, I think. At least those two affect the board in some major way.
I liked the Urborg one, though. I do think that's cool.
I don't mind removing First Strike, I guess.
Yeah.
That one's pretty...
But removing Landwalk, at least Hammerheim was remove all of the Landwalk.
Yeah. But even that is, like, redundant with Urborg, in my opinion.
This
Hammerheim should have been Gaines Mountain Walk or something.
I mean, the pictures on these are really what make them cool as well. I just love the card template and the frame and the picture. Very cool.
Yep.
Very well done. Next we have Mana Matrix and Planar Gate. These are 6-mana artifacts from Legends. And Mana Matrix, you can pay 2 less. So your instants and enchantments cost 2 less. And then Planar Gate is your creature cards cost 2 less. And these have some antiquated wording on them too. But these are cool cards, both playable in Commander, I imagine. Right? Have you ever actually played them in Commander? I've done Planar Gate, and I liked it.
It's fine. They're both fine, actually.
They're not
amazing. I think
amazing.
I've done Mana Matrix in like a prison deck, so yeah.
That's cool. They're expensive on the top end. If you have 6 mana, you really should be able to play any creature or any other spell. But it's cool that, at least in Commander, it could be a relevant ability,
It just helps to make things cheaper, at least.
People want to play the nostalgic cards.
Yeah. Playing more than one a turn.
Oh, weird. Harvest. Well, that ends Cyclical Evolution. We're on to Weird Harvests. This is the segment of the show where we talk about a weird card in Magic. And we're not talking about the actual card design so much, specifically the name and picture, some combination. So this week we've got Goblin Flectomancer. So this is a 2 red and a blue 2/2 Goblin Wizard, and it has sacrifice it and change the target of target instant or sorcery spell, so kind of like a redirect. And the reason we picked it this week, the name's not so weird, I guess, but Flectomancer is kind of a funny made up sort of idea. And since it kind of makes sense why it's, it's trying to be very technology based.
Yeah.
Steampunkish is kind of what you think of when you think of Is It. But maybe you want to describe the picture of what's exactly going on.
He's wearing like 3D goggles. I don't know how to describe those, but that's pretty sweet. He's got a big apparatus strapped to his head with jumper cables attached to his ears and some sort of blue liquid in beakers. I don't know. It's all attached to his head. Anyway, there's also this funnel-like thing that is there to absorb magic and then cast it out somewhere else. But what the flavor text describes it as is, rerouting magic through a goblin's brain is the surest way to throw it wildly off course. So all they're trying to do is divert the magic, and they'll use this goblin's brain to do that. And it's really funny. He's got like half an opera glass or opera goggle. I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, he's got like 2 sets of glasses. One's like sunglasses. Actually, he's got 3 sets of glasses.
Yeah, one right on his eyes.
He's got like a monocle, glasses, and then sunglasses on the end, and a telescope after that.
Yeah.
So it's really like quad apparatus.
And then he's also got
his eyes.
A mirror around his neck too. So that also helps in the reflecting.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
It's a very comical picture for sure.
Because
you can tell there was humor in it.
He looks so proud of himself, or like he almost looks disdainful.
He looks condescending.
Yeah.
He looks like he's looking down on people.
Yeah, but you know that all that's going to happen to him is his brain is going to get fried when they try and reroute magic through it.
So it's actually a funny, flavorful, old, weird-arted card, but always fun with Is It.
Yeah.
Just the technology cards. There's been some... In fact, another Weird Harvest card we've had before is from Is It. The, what's the 0-2... Blind.
Oh, yeah, Goblin Test Pilot.
Yeah,
That's another great Goblin Is It card, yeah.
So very cool guild for generating weird cards. But, alright, that's going to be it for this week. I hope you're enjoying these segments. These are a lot of fun to make and put together. So, we've got a lot more cycles for you coming up. We'll see you in a week.
Later.